You're 14 years old, eating watery cabbage soup at your family's kitchen table in Leningrad, 1938, when the knock comes. Not a polite knock, the kind that splinters wood. Three men in long coats push past your mother before she can scream. They don't explain, they don't show papers. One of them grabs your father by the collar and drags him into the hallway like a sack of wet grain. Your mother lunges, clawing at their sleeves, and gets a rifle butt to the jaw for her trouble. You stand there, soup spoon still in your hand, watching your entire life collapse in under 90 seconds. Then the tallest one turns to you. His eyes are flat, bored, like he's done this 1,000 times. He has. The boy too, he says. And just like that, you're cargo. They shove you into the back of a black car that smells like tobacco and fear. No trial, no charges, no explanation. Your crime? Your father once told a joke about Stalin at a dinner party. Someone laughed. Someone else didn't. That someone reported him, and now your whole bloodline is tainted. In Stalin's Soviet Union, guilt isn't personal. It's genetic. Your father's a traitor, which makes you a traitor's son, which makes you just as dangerous as a loaded gun pointed at the state. You're 14. You don't even know what political dissent means. Doesn't matter. You're about to learn what punishment for it feels like. The interrogation lasts 3 days. They don't beat you, not yet. They just keep you awake under a bare bulb, asking questions you can't answer. Who are your father's contacts? What organizations does he belong to? You don't know. You're a kid who likes football and wooden model planes. But they don't care about truth. They care about confession. By hour 50, you'd confess to assassinating the Tsar if it meant 10 minutes of sleep. You sign a paper you can barely read. Congratulations. You've just been sentenced to 10 years of corrective labor. You don't even know what a gulag is yet. You're about to find out. They load you onto a cattle car with 60 other prisoners. The air is thick with the stench of sweat, urine, and salted fish, the only food they give you. There's a hole in the floor for a toilet. 60 people, one hole, no privacy, no dignity. The train doesn't move for 2 days. People start fainting from the heat. An old man in the corner stops breathing on day 3. Nobody removes the body. There's no room to move away from it. You just sit there, shoulder to shoulder with the living and the dead, rattling east across a country so vast it takes weeks to cross. Some prisoners don't survive the ride. You envy them. The train stops somewhere in Siberia. You stumble out into air so cold it burns your lungs like swallowing broken glass. The temperature is minus 30 degrees. You're wearing a cotton shirt and trousers meant for a Leningrad autumn. That's it. A guard tosses you a padded jacket so thin you could read a newspaper through it. Maybe a hat if you're lucky. Mittens if you're blessed by God himself. You look around. Barbed wire fences stretch in every direction. Wooden watchtowers loom overhead, manned by guards with rifles who look at you the way a farmer looks at livestock. Not with cruelty exactly, with indifference. You're not a person to them. You're a unit of labor, a number, a tool that eats. The barracks are wooden shacks that groan in the wind. You sleep on bare planks, no mattress, no blanket beyond what you came in wearing. The place reeks of unwashed bodies, mildew, and something worse underneath it all. A sweet, rotting smell you'll later learn is disease eating people alive. There are 2,000 prisoners in your camp. Some are murderers, thieves, hardened criminals covered in orthodox tattoos who run the camp's social order like a mafia. They decide who sleeps where, who eats first, who lives comfortably, and who gets a knife between the ribs for looking at them wrong. Then there's you, a 14-year-old kid whose biggest crime was having the wrong father. You learn fast that the criminals scare you more than the guards. The guards just ignore you. The criminals enjoy your fear. Your first morning, a bell clangs before dawn. Your work assignment, felling timber. You're handed a primitive axe so dull it would struggle to cut bread and pointed toward a frozen forest. You work for 14 hours straight, knee-deep in snow, swinging that axe until your palms blister, burst, bleed, and blister again. Your fingers go numb within the first hour. By the fifth, you can't feel your feet. The experienced prisoners work like machines, dead-eyed, mechanical, conserving every ounce of energy. You hack wildly, desperately, terrified of falling behind. Because falling behind means failing your quota. And failing your quota means your food gets cut. And less food means less energy, which means less work, which means even less food. It's a death spiral designed with the precision of a Swiss watch. Except instead of telling time, it counts down the days until you collapse. Food. Let's talk about food, because it's the only thing you'll think about for the next decade. Your daily ration is a bowl of thin soup that's mostly hot water with a few cabbage leaves floating in it, like drowned insects, and a chunk of black bread around 140 grams. That's it. That's breakfast, lunch, and dinner combined. And here's the cruel part. The amount you get depends on how much you work. Hit your quota, full ration, miss it, and they slice your bread thinner. Miss it badly, and you get nothing. Starving people can't work. People who can't work starve faster. Stalin designed a system where the punishment for weakness is more weakness. There's a word prisoners use for the men who've reached the end of this cycle. Goners. Walking skeletons with hollow eyes and skin like wet paper draped over bone. You see them shuffling around camp, and you know you're looking at your future if you're not careful. They're dead men who haven't gotten the memo yet. You eat your bread in secret, cupping it in both hands, back against the wall, eyes scanning for thieves, because everyone steals here. Tobacco, shoes, sewing needles, scraps of bread, they're all currency. And people kill over currency. A man gets stabbed over a pair of boots. Another has his teeth knocked out for half a cigarette. Gambling rings run by the criminal gangs take everything the weak have left. You learn to sleep with your bread inside your shirt, pressed against your chest, where you can feel it with every heartbeat. Losing it means losing a day of survival. You're 15 now, and you've already learned that trust is the most expensive thing in the Gulag. Nobody can afford it. Months blur together. Timber in winter, canal digging in summer. Your hands are a ruin of calluses and scars. You've watched men crushed by falling trees, swallowed by collapsing mine shafts, frozen solid standing upright because they were too exhausted to lie down before they died. There's no safety equipment, no protective gear. You work with your bare hands when the tools break, and the tools always break. A prisoner next to you loses 3 fingers to frostbite and keeps working the next morning because the alternative is no food. Another one deliberately drops a log on his own foot, shattering the bones. He'd rather be crippled than spend another day swinging an axe. Some don't bother with half measures. They simply walk into the frozen forest and don't come back. The guards don't chase them. The cold finishes the job. Women have it worse. And that's saying something in a place where worse is a competitive sport. Many of the women in your camp were arrested simply for being related to someone the state didn't like. Daughters of enemies, wives of dissenters, they do the same backbreaking labor as the men. But after dark, they face threats the men don't. Guards and criminal inmates assault them with impunity. Some women take camp husbands, trading themselves for protection, an extra scrap of bread, a warmer sleeping spot. It's not romance, it's survival math. When a woman gives birth in the Gulag, the baby stays with her until age 2 and then gets taken. The combination of starvation, filth, and no medical care kills many of those infants before they ever see the outside world. The ones who survive often carry the scars, mental and physical, for life. You're allowed 2 letters home per year. 2. You sit on your plank bed, hands shaking, trying to compress your entire crumbling existence into a few censored lines. You can't say what's happening. You can't describe the cold, the hunger, the beatings. So you write things like, "I am well and I hope you are healthy," and you stare at the words knowing they're lies, so obvious they're almost cruel. You don't know if your mother is alive. You don't know if she got your last letter. The silence from home is a wound that never scabs over. But you write anyway, because the act of writing is the only proof you're still human. Escape crosses your mind 1,000 times. But look around. You're in the middle of Siberia, surrounded by barbed wire, watchtowers, armed guards, and hundreds of miles of frozen wilderness. The only countries that won't ship you straight back to Stalin are Finland and China, and both are impossibly far. A few prisoners have tried. Most get shot before they clear the fence. The ones who make it past the wire usually freeze to death within days. But once in a while, a story circulates through the barracks like contraband. A man named Chernavin, who befriended a local peasant, learned the guard's schedules, smuggled his wife and son out during a visit, and fled across rivers, forests, and mountains to Finland by boat. He made it. He actually made it. You cling to that story the way a drowning man clings to driftwood, not because you believe you'll escape, but because you need to believe someone did. Years stack like corpses. You're 20 now, then 22, then 24. Your sentence was 10 years, but that number means nothing. When your term expires, they simply add another. No hearing, no explanation, just a guard handing you a paper that says you're staying. Prisoners call it the revolving door. You walk toward freedom and get spun right back into hell. Your body is breaking. Your joints ache from years of labor. Your lungs burn from disease that the camp doctors won't treat because you're not worth the medicine. Your teeth are loose from malnutrition. You're 24, but you move like a man of 60. The Gulag doesn't just steal your years. It steals the body you'd use to live them. Then, in 1953, a rumor tears through the camp like wildfire. Stalin is dead. You don't believe it. You've survived on suspicion and paranoia for a decade. But the guards look shaken, confused, some even scared. For the first time, the men with the rifles look as lost as the men behind the wire. Slowly, impossibly, things begin to change. The new leader, Khrushchev, starts opening the gates. Millions of prisoners stumble out of camps across the Soviet Union, blinking in sunlight they'd forgotten existed. You're one of them. You walk through the gate on legs that barely hold you. But freedom is its own kind of prison. Your mother is dead. Your apartment is gone. Your old friends cross the street when they see you coming. You don't talk about what happened, not because they don't ask, but because the words don't exist for what you've seen. You flinch at loud noises. You hoard bread under your pillow. You wake up screaming in rooms where nobody's listening. The Gulag held over 3 million prisoners when Stalin died. 18 million passed through its gates over its lifetime. Between executions, starvation, disease, and exhaustion, millions never walked out. You did. But the camp didn't leave you. It's in your bones, your nightmares, the way you can't stop scanning every room for threats. You survived. That's the story people want to hear. But surviving and living are two different things, and the Gulag made sure you'd never confuse the two. The Soviet Union eventually admitted the Gulag was an economic failure. All those millions of broken bodies, all that stolen life, and it didn't even work. The canals prisoners dug by hand, barely usable. The timber they felled could have been cut faster by paid workers with proper equipment. Stalin built a machine that devoured human beings and produced almost nothing in return except suffering and silence. The Gulag's story was buried for decades, but the scars it carved into Russian society are still bleeding today, passed down through generations who learned to fear their own government, to whisper instead of speak, to trust no one. You carry those scars too. Every survivor does, and maybe that's why the story matters. Not because it ended, but because the people who lived it never stopped carrying it. Their voices deserve to be heard. So listen, remember, and make sure the world never forgets what happens when power decides that people are cheaper than machines.